So our goal in this lesson is to position the camera, set up the lighting and even the background. Instead of something like this, which is nice but a little boring, we want to create something like this, which really has an extra dimension to it because of the lighting and the background. And it's even possible to create something where we render a reflection so that we get the impression of maybe a glossy showroom floor, and we can even render the gold portions so that they really pop and look like they're gold. So I'll show you how to do this step by step from our starting point here. And if you bring up the version you're happy with of your object, the first thing we want to do is click anywhere on this background canvas. And you should then see under properties, you have a background checkbox. And I'll show you the way of recreating what I've done for my kind of hero version of this, but you can feel free to play and experiment and do something different yourself. So I'm going to change the background to a jet black, and then still with the background selected, under ground plane, which you want to ensure is toggled on, I'm going to bring up the reflection opacity to about 50%. And at first you notice that seems to do nothing, it makes no difference. And that's because for the more advanced effects that take up your processing power, you have to actually toggle a preview off or on if you want to see how that's looking. So up in the top right here, we have show hide render preview, and when you click that toggle, you'll probably start to hear my CPU fan come on as I do that. You can see it renders that reflection there, and the reflection roughness, well, that will affect how I guess clear, almost like looking in a mirror, or as I increase the roughness, how diffused that reflection is. And I've noticed the more it's diffused, the longer it seems to take to render that preview. So I'm going to leave it at about 9% for now, and I'll turn that preview off just so you can hear me over the fan. So immediately that's made a big difference to this scene. It adds a bit of drama, but the lighting is a little basic. We've not changed it. This is just what you get out of a box. So first of all, I'm going to select my votive and just rotate it a little, and then rotate the box so that they're facing each other, and I've got kind of a more interesting position that I can work with here. I think that's a nice angle that should show off everything nicely. And I'm going to pan up so that we should get plenty of a reflection in below. So now the lighting. If you click on the lighting filter under your starter assets, you have an environment light, which basically sets the makeshift theme that is sitting behind you, behind the camera, and the objects interact with that. So if I click on some of these examples here, you'll see that it will now render this as if it was sitting in this lighting situation. And if I click on some of the more unusual ones, you'll see you could even have a colored stage behind you. You could make it look as if it was sitting out in a forest, on a sunrise campsite, on a lake, all sorts of things. So I just want to go for the studio panels light, and then I'm going to add directional lights that I'm able to manipulate further myself. So to do that, if you click up under directional lights at the 3-point light, that will straight away drop in 3 lights, and they appear under your environments heading here under scene. So we have a key light, a fill light, and a backlight. And at first, to get used to what these do, you can simply twirl the visibility off and on. And then I would suggest just turn one light on at a time and play with it to understand what it does and position it to achieve what you want it to. So for my key light, this is going to be a fairly intense light that I'm going to, under actions here, you've got this crosshair icon that will actually let you point with this selected, aim light at point. And I'm going to click to have it hit this portion of my box. And that creates quite a nice, interesting shadow. I quite like that, but you can also manually change the rotation here, the properties, to see what this will do. And unlike the environment light, these directional lights, you'll notice they are actually capable of casting a shadow, one object to cast a shadow on another. You can also adjust for height if you like, so you can see when it's lower I get a little bit of a shadow here in the candle, and you could raise that up to remove that shadow, or perhaps you like it. I think I quite like to have that there. You can change the size of a light, and you can soften the edge. And again, you get just a quick idea of this in the quick preview, but if you turn on the render preview, you start to see with much more detail what that light is actually doing. And you could make your changes with that render preview turned on. And every time you change a setting, you'll notice it will refresh the preview. But as I've warned you, this really will test the power of your CPU. So I tend to work with it off. I'm happy with the key light, so I'm now going to also activate the fill light. And the idea of this is usually to soften shadows. So I don't really want to soften the shadows. I think they add quite a nice sense of drama here. So I'm going to lower the intensity right down, and I'm going to rotate this until I see it's hitting just the portions that I want it to. Next, the backlight. And again, I quite like the drama without that being added. So I'm going to lower that down. Then I'll just check my render preview to see how that's coming together. And I'm really liking that. I think that's definitely the effect that I'm looking for. So when you've positioned your camera at an angle you're happy with, so for me, that's the angle I want, you can save camera bookmarks. And then each of these bookmarks, you'll have the option to render from that exact position. So you don't have to worry about coming back to it again, which is really useful. So you'll find that here, there's a camera bookmarks icon, and you just click the little plus, and I'm going to call this front. And then if I rotate around, and we could have a view perhaps here and call this side. Now something else you have the option to do, and I'm not sure it will work well in this scenario, but if you had, for example, an object that you wanted to fade away in the background, you can actually click under environment, you've got camera in your scene, and under camera you can change the field of view if you wish, and you can also use focus, and by twirling focus on, clicking set focus point, and then adjusting the blur amount, you'll notice that it will actually start to fade other objects as if you have a bokeh, a depth of field. So if I turn on the render preview to better show you this, you can see now most of the focus is just on this very narrow central portion of a box there, that logo. So that might be an effect you want to create. In this case, it's not what I want to do, but you do have that option. And when you save a camera bookmark, it will save all of these settings under camera focus. So as soon as I go to my bookmark and click back on front, you'll see that focus disappears and it goes back to exactly the camera settings that I had before. So one last thing we're going to do before we're ready to actually render this out, and that is to make the elements that I intend to have gold foiled actually render as gold in the app. And we can do that if we double click to select, or at least attempt to select the right graphic here. I can see it's actually grabbed the repeating pattern behind. So I'm just going to click until I get the right one. There we are. I'm looking for my logo on the front face. And under properties, you can see you have a roughness and a metallic slider. So when you increase the metallic slider, I'm going to put that up to 90. That creates the impression of something that's very reflective, and it kind of takes on the properties of something metallic. The roughness is how matte or glossy this is. So even if you increase the metallic all the way to 100, If a roughness is still high, it's still at 84, it just won't look reflective. As soon as I lower this down to make it more reflective, you notice that starts to, even in the quick preview, make quite a difference to the way this looks. And if I deselect and I click the render preview, you should see that's now really got a gold shimmer to it. And in a high resolution render, that should come out and look really striking. So you can repeat that method for any of the artwork that you want to be rendered with a metallic finish, which I'm going to do. And then when you're happy, join me in the next lesson where we'll render this together.